and definitely an inspirational and, should we say, educational one, dealing with topics that are very relevant to society, and how we can, should we say, put ourselves in better spaces and places as far as that is concerned, and uplift the way we live by creating more quality. And talking about that, September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, a time to raise awareness on the stigmatized and often taboo topic, in addition to shifting public perception. And I think that's important because it's something that we look at with a very negative connotation, which I understand. But I think we also need to understand the types of mental health situations people are finding themselves in. So nobody better to chat to this morning than Shuhaida Adam from Islamic Careline. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran for having us on your show today.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us, and of course, should we say, educate us with regard to a very relative yet very sad and serious topic. Let's talk about Islamic Careline's, should we say, involvement in this. We know, mental health through the COVID-19 period has increased many a fold due to the types of situations people have found themselves in. And unfortunately, it has led to many suicides. We're not saying that it's something that is acceptable, but what we're saying is we need to understand the situations people have faced through those mental health conditions, which has then led to that. And I'm sure you'd agree with me on that point.
No, definitely. I think the global pandemic plunged us into situations we were wholly unprepared for. And as a society, I think many people try to adapt on a day-by-day basis without the usual mechanisms of support that they usually could access, or even the usual family support, the usual organizational support that they could access. And they experienced a great amount of difficulty. People experienced great loss. And it entirely overwhelmed families, it entirely overwhelmed countries. So our risk of suicide was much higher. Unfortunately, I don't have specific statistics to aid what we're saying right now. Also, statistics take a while to collate and to give us a bigger picture. So because we are very much still in the middle of it, it's possible that our statistics will only come out a bit later.
Let's talk about the actual situation that you from the Islamic Careline have been facing. What paint us a picture about should we say, the types of mental health issues you have come across with people, because this is why we want them to understand this is what leads to suicide, because it becomes a taboo subject, and we know from an Islamic point of view, of course, suicide is not something that's acceptable. But in certain instances, I think many a times it's a person's mental health condition that actually leads them to that, where they're stuck in this bubble and then suddenly something happens and something triggers them off.
No, so as you rightly said, something could possibly trigger the situation. So one of the greatest cases that we've seen right now are people who are struggling to cope with loss. And we know that people who experience sudden loss, it's one of the higher risk factors of people who will then either they will commit suicide and then the suicide will be completed, so they will then die, or it's an attempt and the suicide is not successful. However, it's self-harm. So the greatest thing that we see right now is the struggle with sudden loss. It's the death of close loved ones, the death of family members, and also loss related to economic support. So people who have lost their businesses, people who have lost their jobs, the ability to provide for their families. That's causing a great strain. People who have lost their marriages through external factors or internal factors. Also, last year's lockdown led to many couples spending continuous time together without a lot of distractions. So they were then forced to face the difficulties in their marriage. So we had quite a bit of divorces also. And this loss, it can be overwhelming when our capacity to cope is entirely overwhelmed. And
I agree with you. And I'm going to come in there and say it. I just want people to understand the type of situations people are experiencing at the moment. And when you talk about loss, I want to talk about the grief of a loved one that you've lost. The norm would be to, of course, have that closure. But unfortunately, due to COVID-19, that closure is not happening, because obviously what is happening is if a person passes away, for example, in a hospital, they're taken straight to the graveyard and to the cemeteries, and they are buried there. So people are literally, like, should we say, just hanging in limbo. That closure that they normally get by looking at that body and praying for that person and seeing that actual person there, it's not there anymore. So I think having to change that mindset and try and get to understand that there is a loss, but it feels like, almost as though the person's still there, but they're not. So I think that is something that we need to recognize, is that the types of grief that people are facing as far as losing someone is concerned has changed tremendously.
So definitely, as you said, the actual loss of the person and how we're able to grieve afterwards. But what we found people are also struggling with is even before the loved one has passed on. People are spending time in hospital for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time, in high care, in ICU, and as family members, we are not allowed to go and visit them. We cannot have anything to assist in terms of helping them with their health. So there's a great sense of helplessness. As you know, our loved ones are struggling with their health. So people are struggling with that. And then afterwards, so once the burial is complete, our usual mechanisms of support, usually, especially in the Muslim community, there's a funeral home and family members would gather together and support the grieving family. However, due to COVID regulations, people are not able to do that. They can support from far. They possibly send old parcels or they make phone calls, but they are not able to be there in person. And during the hard lockdown, when people had lost family members, other family members couldn't even come and stay with them. They couldn't travel to come and do their grieving with the family. Also, when they couldn't cross provinces. So people have found all of that has added to a sense of compounded grief.
Yes.
We are unable to cope with it. We are unable to reach a sense of peace with the passing and with our grief afterwards. Also, due to the ages of the people who have passed on, our loved ones, many young people have passed on. People have left also younger children. So we have young people who would not have even imagined, or the thought of losing a parent has not crossed their mind, or even as elderly people, the thought of burying their children has never crossed their mind. And now to cope with this, and with COVID, people have lost multiple family members within a very short period of time. And unfortunately, it is still happening. Sadly, it is. So I can't even say that the situation is over. But all of this has really led to a lot of difficulty. And our age group of people who are struggling, we find it across the age. We have younger children who are struggling because they've lost close friends, and younger children oftentimes they don't fully understand the nature of loss, the nature of death. And because the adults are quite focused on their own grief, they don't really reach out to younger children. Or we try to protect our children from the reality of death. We try to actually be as open and transparent with them as possible. So younger children, when they don't have a full set of information, they tend to fill in the gaps with whatever suits them in their mind, and they could be as creative as possible also. But we prefer rather for people to be as open and as factual with children as possible. Then we find also our young couples, they are losing their spouses. They just started their newly married lives, and within a short period of time, they are also losing their spouses. We find parents are, of course, losing children. Elderly parents are losing children. Our elderly citizens are losing their friends at a much faster rate than they could imagine. And they also hold, of course, a great amount of fear for what we are facing right now.
Right.
There was a period of time when things looked very hopeless. Things looked bleak. It seems like the pandemic and the virus is going to overcome our society, and there's no way out for us. So people struggled with a sense of hopelessness, a sense of worthlessness, because the people had lost their jobs and they were unable to find new employment during that time. So all of these are risk factors that can increase a person's
Yes.
I don't want to say the likelihood of committing suicide, but can increase difficulty and thoughts of ending it all.
Well, this is where I was going to get to now, is that don't you think that we should actually determine the person's state of mental health in the first place? Because that's when we're going to, of course, determine that they are having a situation where they can't overcome their mental issues as such, where they're in a situation where they're either depressed or they have loads of anxiety due to said, the new circumstances that are prevailing. And what sort of tips would you give people to look at, like to say, this is the type of mental health situation you could pick up on a person? Because, I mean, a lot of the times, many people don't even want to talk about it. They don't even want to bring it to the fore and say, this is how we're going to deal with it. But I think let's just come back with that answer now. We're just going to go for a quick break and let's see how we can unpack this.
Would you like to give Sadaqah 365 days a year? You can with the Al Imdad Foundation's Daily Sadaqah program. Donate as little as R1 a day for a month for each member of your family, up to any specified amount, and receive monthly feedback on where your contributions have made a difference. Visit alimdad.com and download your Daily Sadaqah debit order form or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
Alhamdulillah, we are finally free of riba. Barkat smells lovely.
Yeah, with Yakin, I managed to stop all the riba, Hajo. Ach, this insurance price is going up again.
Oh, we are not free of riba, Babu. You need to stop the insurance.
We have to have insurance, Hajo. You know how bad it is with all the crime and the accidents.
Have a little yakin now, Babu.
Yeah, man, I do have a little yakin. But I wish there was a way to leave all these riba insurance companies, man. It's my riba.
Babu, I can't handle this. The stench. It stinks.
Is that my underarms?
No, the riba stinks. Please find a way to stop this riba insurance, Babu.
Leaving riba insurance is easier than you think. Call Amana IFS for all your personal and commercial takaful needs. 0861 786 393. Amana, leave riba for good. Amana IFS is a registered financial services provider.
Add a sprinkling of sparkles to your magical parties and special occasions with colorful party supplies and decorations to a wide range of bacon goods and tools. Packaging from gift bags to meat bags, foil and polystyrene containers, elegant serviettes and intimate candles to disposable wet wipes. A range of glassware, bakeware and stunning wedding accessories just for you. Wholesale packaging available. Sprinkles and Sparkles Party Shop. You'll want it all. Find us at 431 Inanda Road, Parlock, Durban. Call 031 577 0604. Our operating hours are weekdays from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., weekends and public holidays from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Follow us on Instagram at Spring and Spark.
Africa. As the crisis in Palestine continues, the Africa Muslims Agency teams are on the ground facilitating emergency food and medical assistance to the affected families. Donate 15,000 rand or any amount and help the people of Palestine. Call AMA now on 083-251-9376 or donate online at africamuslimsagency.co.za. Africa Muslims Agency, inspiring the spirit of giving.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Welcome back, and we're in conversation with Shuhaida Adam from the Islamic Careline with regard to suicide prevention and creating the awareness. Before we left for that break, we spoke about the types of situations people are facing, but also having to look at the types of things we can do to try and help them get out of those mental health states that they find themselves in, which eventually at some point, when it gets really bad, does lead to suicide. So what we want to do is just create the awareness and try and help people determine how they can help those that are in really serious mental health situations. Shuhaida, are you on the line? Shuhaida?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So as I was saying when I got back, we were just discussing, of course, the types of mental health situations people are finding themselves in at this point in time. And what I was saying is, what sort of pointers would we give them to be able to determine that a person, because a lot of the times we know people that are suffering with mental health issues don't bring it to the fore. They just keep quiet about it and they suffer silently. And I think that's what eventually it becomes so overwhelming. Then inevitably it does lead to a possible suicide, which we don't want to happen. And this is what we're saying. We're creating the awareness because it is, that month of prevention. Shuhaida, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what happened, but I can hear you clearly now.
Okay, so back to the question. I was saying before we left for the break that many people are at this point in time are suffering from very serious mental health issues, but are not talking about it. They're just dealing with it silently. And inevitably, what's happening is as that time is going on, that anxiety and that stress and the depression is getting worse. And that's what eventually leads to suicide, where we need to create the awareness to prevent it. This is what we're doing. It's a prevention month. We want to give people pointers on how to be able to move themselves into a better space to be able to deal with the types of situations they're in from a mental health point of view.
Like you said, we are afraid to talk about it. Oftentimes, as a community, we under the impression that if we talk about it, we're going to actually unknowingly encourage it. However, a lot of experts, they talk against it, and they ask us to be quite direct with people that we engage with. And to even if we do suspect that this person is possibly suicidal, to bring it up directly. Okay? One of the key factors also that increases the risk of suicide is social isolation. So we ask also that people build meaningful social interactions with family members who are possibly at risk. People who have a history of mental health disorders, who are currently diagnosed or who have previously been diagnosed, they've been on treatment, they've been through therapy, they've stopped therapy, and they are still possibly at risk. So we want people to reach out to their loved ones, engage with them meaningfully, engage with them about the concerns, about where they are, be willing to listen, be very non-judgmental, not to debate about whether this person's actions are right or wrong. So even if they're talking about certain actions that they have done that they feel shame or remorse or feel very negatively about, and they're holding that difficulty, to be as non-judgmental as possible. Show support, show a willingness to support them on their journey to help, to positive mental health. You can also point them to resources that can help them. You can support them when they contact the resources, or if possible, some with our elderly, perhaps, for example, if they need enough to a counseling session. If possible, please try to assist with that. Some of the practical things that you can also do. People who are struggling with financial difficulties, if possible, to provide some form of assistance. If you can't, then point them in the right direction where they can get the right type of assistance. People who may have access to items that they could use for committing, so attempting suicide.
Right.
Remove that. That's quite a practical thing that you can do. Remove those items. People who hold and keep firearms in their home, ensure that it is locked up safely, or remove it from the home if you cannot do that. That's one of the most practical things that we can say you can do. If it's a crisis situation, know already who do you need to contact if it's a crisis situation, especially if it's in your home, and if you are a parent or if you are a sibling or a spouse of somebody who is possibly suicidal. know who to contact. So your resources to contact is your local ambulance service, your local hospital service, or your family doctor, and even your local community security. So your SAT services, your community safety initiatives. Contact them in case of an emergency. Please do not be sworn to secrecy. So what I find is a lot of young people, our adolescents, they get sworn to secrecy. If they suspect a friend, or if a friend confides in them that they are thinking of suicide, then they do ask somebody, they ask this person to please keep it a secret. However, in the long run, a secret is going to be very harmful. So initially, if possible, the person may be upset that you broke their confidentiality and you confided in somebody else. However, you've done it in order to help this person, and you can share with them that this is something I have to do, and in the long run, there will be greater benefit. Trying to offer some form of hope, however, without offering a false sense of hope. So without telling them that everything is going to be okay and the world is going to come back to normal, or just say, for example, a young person who had failed, telling them that they will pass, without offering that false reassurance, trying to offer them some form of hope that even if there is failure, even if there is breakdown, even if there is loss, there's some sort of support until the person themselves are ready to move forward, or they can build their own coping skills.
Yeah, it's important, as you said, for people to understand that there are support structures out there, and that there's a lot of help and there is hope, and they should keep the faith. And I think that's what's important, is to understand that they're not alone in this. They're not the only ones facing those major challenges and those major issues, especially during this period of time. I think every single person, including ourselves, are going through some form of challenge or the other. And it's just based on how we reach out and how we deal with it. And as I was saying, support structures are very important, because those support structures can actually make you realize how it is that you can move yourself up into a better space and uplift your spirits.
So definitely, and I think we need to normalize also reaching out for help. It doesn't only have to be at crisis point to reach out for help. It can be as part of our general coping strategies, part of our self-care and looking after our well-being. If we normalize this in our communities and in our society, inshallah, when people are in crisis, they will then also recall that they can reach out for support. So I think it's really important that people know who to reach out to for support, have the numbers available, and when they come across somebody that they're concerned about, share it with them, talk about it openly. I think one of the key things that most of the prevention strategies that I've seen that talk to even people, young people who are supporting their peers, or parents who are supporting their children, their adolescents, the elderly who are supporting each other, is the key thing to talk about it.
Most definitely.
To point out, to reach out for the resources in their community.
As you're saying, Shuhaida, communication is key, firstly. And secondly, we need to understand that we need to nip this in the bud the minute it starts, so that it doesn't reach those kind of heights and situations. And I'm glad that you've brought that to the fore. But we seem to be running out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning on the show and giving us some foresight into the situation, so that we can understand it better and help those not even get to those particular stages, but determine the mental health issue and deal with it in the initial stages. So Jazakallah so much for joining us, and we wish you nothing but the best going forward, and do stay safe. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. It was such a pleasure to be on your show today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on. Take care. That was Shuhaida Adam giving us some information with regard to, of course, mental health. And it is Suicide Prevention Month, so I think it's important. And that was my way of actually enticing you to a better space with my ID. But before we leave, I just want to read something out quickly. It says, you are being presented with a choice: evolve or remain. If you choose to remain unchanged, you will be presented with the same challenges, the same routine, the